Silas lived a life painted in shades of gray. The vibrant colors had faded with Martha's passing 2 years ago. His small farm, nestled in the rolling hills of Oakhaven, was his world, but it was a world that felt increasingly lonely. He rose before dawn each day, tending to his chickens, his aging cow Bess, and the small vegetable patch that barely provided enough to keep him fed. The bank was threatening foreclosure. The yearly rains weren't enough, and the price of feed kept climbing. Silas wasn't a complainer, but the weight of the world felt heavy on his shoulders. He missed Martha's laughter, her gentle touch, and the way she could always make him smile, even on the darkest days. His days were filled with the same routines. Feed the chickens, milk Bess, check the fences, and try to coax something, anything, to grow in the stubbornly dry soil. Evenings were spent in the quiet solitude of his small farmhouse, a simple supper, and the worn pages of a book, trying to escape the gnawing emptiness. He lived simply. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and Silas rarely ventured into town. It was a predictable, quiet life, a life that felt a million miles away from the shocking events that were about to unfold. He was a good man, a kind man, but a man worn down by loss and hardship, unaware that his quiet world was about to be turned upside down. The tranquility of Oakhaven was shattered one starless night. A wave of fear swept through the small community like a wildfire. It started with whispers, hushed conversations at the general store, and worried glances over fences. Then came the sirens, their mournful wails echoing through the hills, cutting through the peaceful night. The news spread quickly: the Remington estate, the grandest property in the county, had been attacked. The Remingtons were a wealthy family, known for their philanthropy and their somewhat reclusive lifestyle. Rumors swirled: a robbery gone wrong, a targeted hit, a vengeful act. Details were scarce, but the underlying message was clear: something terrible had happened. Silas, like everyone else, felt a chill run down his spine. He'd never met the Remingtons, but he knew of them. Their wealth was legendary, a stark contrast to his own humble existence. He listened to the snippets of news on his old radio, the static crackling with each grim update. The authorities were tight-lipped, but the word massacre was whispered with increasing frequency. It was said that the entire family, including the staff, were gone. No survivors. The thought sent a shiver down Silas's spine. He couldn't imagine such horror. The quiet life he cherished was suddenly threatened, the peaceful hills now harboring a dark secret. The day after the attack dawned gray and ominous, mirroring the mood of the community. Silas, restless and unable to focus on his usual chores, decided to check the south fence line. A recent storm had weakened it, and he worried about Bess wandering off. He grabbed his tools and headed out, the air thick with a strange tension. As he reached the far corner of his property, near the woods bordering the Remington estate, he noticed something amiss. The barn door, which he always kept latched, was slightly ajar. A knot of unease tightened in his stomach. He hadn't been in the barn since yesterday afternoon. Cautiously, he approached, his hand instinctively reaching for the rusty wrench he carried for repairs. He pushed the door open further, the hinges groaning in protest. The barn was dim, the only light filtering through cracks in the wooden walls. And then he saw her. Huddled in the corner, amidst the hay bales, was a young woman. She was covered in dirt and clearly injured, her clothes torn and bloodied. Her eyes, wide with fear, darted towards him. Silas froze, surprised. The rumors had said there were no survivors. But here, right in his barn, was a living, breathing contradiction to those grim reports. She looked terrified, like a wounded animal caught in a trap. He knew in that instant he couldn't leave her there. Silas slowly lowered the wrench, his heart pounding in his chest. He spoke in a soft, reassuring voice, the same tone he used to soothe Bess when she was skittish. "It's all right, miss. I'm not going to hurt you." He took a step closer, his eyes scanning her injuries. A nasty gash on her arm, a swollen ankle, and bruises blooming on her face. He gently coaxed her out of the corner, offering her a hand. She flinched at first, but then, seeing the genuine concern in his eyes, she hesitantly took it. Her hand was cold and trembling. "My name is Silas," he said, "can you tell me yours?" She whispered, her voice barely audible, "Evelyn." Silas helped her into the farmhouse, settling her on the old sofa in the living room. He fetched a blanket and wrapped it around her shivering frame. He knew he should call the authorities, but something held him back. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was still in danger. He cleaned her wounds with warm water and bandages, his touch gentle and careful. He offered her some soup, which she ate in small, hesitant sips. She didn't say much, her eyes filled with a deep sadness and fear. Silas didn't press her. He understood that she needed time to heal, both physically and emotionally. He knew he couldn't offer her much, but he could offer her safety, shelter, and a little bit of kindness. And right now, that seemed like the most important thing in the world. He would protect her, no matter what. Before the nightmares, before the blood, before the chilling screams that echoed through the grand halls, Evelyn's life was a fairy tale. She grew up in the Remington estate, a sprawling mansion filled with warmth and laughter. Her parents, though wealthy, instilled in her the importance of kindness and compassion. She spent her days exploring the vast gardens, reading in the library, and learning from her beloved tutor, Miss Abigail. Her father, a shrewd businessman, always made time for her, telling her stories of his adventures and teaching her about the world. Her mother, a talented artist, nurtured Evelyn's creativity, encouraging her to paint and express herself. She had a younger brother, Thomas, whom she adored. They were inseparable, playing games in the woods and sharing secrets under the starry sky. Their life was one of privilege, but it was also filled with love and genuine connection. Evelyn learned to ride horses, speak multiple languages, and appreciate the finer things in life, but her parents also ensured she understood the value of hard work and empathy. They volunteered at local charities, and Evelyn often accompanied them, learning firsthand about the struggles of others. The Remington estate was more than just a home, it was a sanctuary, a place where Evelyn felt safe and loved. But that sanctuary was about to be shattered, leaving her alone and vulnerable in a world she no longer recognized. The memory of her family's smiling faces now haunted her waking hours, a constant reminder of what she had lost. Days turned into weeks. Evelyn, slowly but surely, began to heal. Silas, with his quiet patience and unwavering kindness, created a safe space for her to process her trauma. He never pried, never demanded answers, but simply offered a listening ear and a comforting presence. He told her stories of Martha, of their life on the farm, of the simple joys and quiet sorrows that made up their years together. He showed her how to milk Bess, how to collect eggs from the chickens, and how to tend to the vegetable garden. Evelyn, in turn, began to open up, sharing snippets of her past, memories of her family, and the devastating events that had shattered her world. She spoke of her father's business acumen, hinting at the vast network of investments and holdings that constituted the Remington family fortune. Silas didn't fully understand the complexities of it all, but he gathered that the money involved was almost unimaginable. He learned that her father had always been secretive about the details, entrusting the information only to a select few advisors and keeping meticulous records locked away in a hidden vault within the estate. As Evelyn healed, a fragile bond formed between them. Silas found solace in her company, a distraction from his own loneliness and financial worries. Evelyn, in turn, found a sense of peace and security in his presence, a haven from the nightmares that still plagued her sleep. They were an unlikely pair, brought together by tragedy, but their shared experience of loss and their mutual need for connection created a bond that transcended their different backgrounds. They found comfort in each other's stories, and they found strength in each other's presence. The steady rhythm of farm life provided a comforting backdrop to their growing connection. Silas taught Evelyn how to mend fences, how to identify different types of birds, and how to read the weather signs in the sky. She, in turn, helped him with his bookkeeping, her sharp mind quickly grasping the complexities of his meager finances. She even started experimenting with new recipes, using the vegetables from the garden to create surprisingly delicious meals. One afternoon, a sheriff's car rumbled up the long driveway. Sheriff Brody, a stout man with a weathered face, stepped out, his expression serious. He had come to ask Silas about the Remington massacre. He inquired if Silas had seen or heard anything unusual in the days leading up to the tragedy. Silas, his heart pounding, answered truthfully, but carefully. He admitted to hearing the sirens and the rumors, but he made no mention of Evelyn. He couldn't betray her trust, not after everything she had been through. He knew he was risking his own safety, but he couldn't bring himself to hand her over to the authorities, not when he felt she was still in danger. Sheriff Brody seemed suspicious, his eyes lingering on the farmhouse for a moment before he finally turned and left. As the car disappeared down the driveway, Silas felt a wave of relief wash over him, followed by a surge of anxiety. He knew it was only a matter of time before they came back, and he had to be prepared to protect Evelyn, no matter the cost. The stakes had just been raised. The revelation came unexpectedly, not through a whispered confession or a dramatic unveiling, but through the flickering screen of Silas's old television. He and Evelyn were sharing a quiet evening, the only light in the room emanating from the small black and white set. The local news was on, covering the aftermath of the Remington massacre. The reporter, standing in front of the grand estate, spoke of the ongoing investigation and the immense wealth at stake. Then, a photograph flashed on the screen, a formal portrait of the Remington family. Silas barely glanced at it, his attention focused on Evelyn. But then, he saw her reaction. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and grief. Silas turned back to the television, his heart pounding in his chest. The reporter was now speaking about Evelyn Remington, the sole heir to the Remington fortune, presumed dead. There, on the screen, was a younger, more polished version of the woman sitting beside him. He looked from the television to Evelyn, then back again. It couldn't be. This refined, wealthy heiress was the same scared, wounded woman he had found hiding in his barn. He finally understood the magnitude of what he had done. He hadn't just saved a survivor of a terrible tragedy, he had unknowingly sheltered the key to an unimaginable fortune. The weight of that realization settled heavily on his shoulders. He looked at Evelyn, her eyes filled with tears. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure, their lives were about to change forever. The news report, and the confirmation of Evelyn's identity, hung heavy in the air. Silas, despite the shock, found that his feelings for Evelyn hadn't changed. She was still the same kind, vulnerable woman he had taken in, regardless of her wealth or social standing. He saw the pain in her eyes, the grief that still clung to her like a shroud. Before he could say anything, a loud banging on the front door shattered the silence. Silas's blood ran cold. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that it wasn't the authorities this time. This was something far more dangerous. He ushered Evelyn behind him, grabbing the old shotgun he kept above the fireplace. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. He crept towards the door, peering through the peephole. He saw 3 figures, their faces obscured by shadows, their postures menacing. They were definitely not law enforcement. These were the kind of men who thrived in the darkness, the kind who wouldn't hesitate to use violence to get what they wanted. Silas knew, with a sinking feeling, that they had come for Evelyn, and for the Remington fortune. He had unknowingly become a pawn in a dangerous game, and he had to protect Evelyn, even if it meant risking his own life. He took a deep breath, his grip tightening on the shotgun. It was time to face the darkness head-on. He threw open the door. "Where is she?" the largest of the 3 men growled, his voice rough and menacing. "We know she's here. Don't make this difficult." Silas stood his ground, the shotgun held steady. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're on private property. I suggest you leave." The men chuckled, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Silas's spine. "Don't play dumb with us, old man. We know about Evelyn Remington. We know she's hiding here. Hand her over, and maybe we'll let you walk away. Silas's grip tightened on the shotgun. He knew he was outmatched, but he wouldn't back down. He had made a promise to protect Evelyn, and he intended to keep it, even if it meant facing these ruthless men alone. I told you, I don't know any Evelyn Remington, Silas lied, his voice unwavering. Now get off my land. The largest man lunged forward, attempting to disarm Silas. Silas, despite his age, was surprisingly agile. He sidestepped the attack and swung the butt of the shotgun, connecting with the man's jaw. The man stumbled back, clutching his face. The other two men immediately attacked, forcing Silas to retreat. He fired a warning shot into the air, the loud blast echoing through the hills. I won't hesitate to use this, he shouted, hoping to buy himself some time. Evelyn, hearing the commotion, peeked out from behind him. Her eyes widened in fear, but she didn't scream. She knew that screaming would only make things worse. She had to think, she had to find a way to help Silas. Their lives depended on it. The confrontation was on. Run, Evelyn, run. Silas yelled, firing another shot, this time aiming for the legs. The men scattered, momentarily stunned. Silas grabbed Evelyn's hand and pulled her towards the back of the house, towards the dense woods that bordered his property. He knew these woods like the back of his hand. He had spent countless hours hunting and exploring them as a boy. He knew every hidden path, every fallen log, every trickling stream. He led Evelyn through the underbrush, his pace surprisingly quick despite his age. He pointed out hidden routes to avoid, showed her how to duck under low-hanging branches, and guided her across a shallow creek. The men were close behind, their heavy footsteps crashing through the woods. Silas knew they couldn't outrun them forever. He had to find a place to hide, a place where they could catch their breath and regroup. He led Evelyn to a small, secluded clearing, hidden behind a thicket of thorny bushes. Stay here, he whispered, and don't make a sound. I'm going to try and draw them away. Evelyn, her face pale with fear, nodded silently. She knew that Silas was risking his life for her, and she felt a surge of guilt and gratitude. She watched as he disappeared back into the woods, his shotgun held high, his determination unwavering. She was alone, vulnerable, but she was also determined to survive. She would not let Silas's sacrifice be in vain. She huddled behind the bushes, her heart pounding in her chest, and waited. She knew she had to be brave, for both of them. Silas, meanwhile, was leading the attackers on a wild goose chase through the woods. He used his knowledge of the terrain to his advantage, setting traps and ambushes. He knew he couldn't overpower them, but he could slow them down, buy himself some time. Back in the clearing, Evelyn wasn't idle. She remembered Silas mentioning a disused well near the edge of the woods. It was old and overgrown, but she recalled him saying it was surprisingly deep. An idea sparked in her mind. Using her knowledge of knots, something she had learned during her summers sailing with her father, she fashioned a makeshift rope from her belt and strips of her dress. She carefully made her way to the well, her heart pounding in her chest. She peered into the darkness, the musty smell of damp earth filling her nostrils. It was deep, just as Silas had said. She tested the rope, making sure it was secure, and then, with a deep breath, she lowered herself into the well. She knew it was a risky plan, but it was the only thing she could think of to help Silas. She had to do something, anything, to even the odds. She might have grown up in a privileged world, but she wasn't helpless. She had learned valuable skills from her parents, skills that were now proving to be invaluable in this desperate situation. She waited in the darkness, listening for any sign of the attackers, her plan ready to be put into action. She would defend Silas and the farm. Silas, bruised and battered, managed to lure the remaining attackers back towards the farmhouse. He had intentionally led them towards the old well, hoping that Evelyn would be ready. He fired a final shot, attracting their attention, and then dove behind a stack of hay bales, waiting for them to follow. As the attackers rounded the corner, Evelyn sprang into action. Using the element of surprise, she kicked out the supports holding up a large wooden beam that Silas had strategically weakened earlier. The beam crashed down, knocking two of the men off their feet. Before they could recover, Silas emerged from behind the hay bales, disarming the third attacker. The men, now outnumbered and outmaneuvered, realized they were trapped. Just then, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Sheriff Brody and his deputies arrived, their guns drawn. They quickly apprehended the remaining attackers, securing the scene. Silas and Evelyn, exhausted but alive, watched as the men were led away in handcuffs. It turned out that Evelyn, while hiding in the woods, had managed to use Silas's old cell phone to send a brief text message to 911, alerting them to their location and the danger they were in. She had used her intelligence and quick thinking to save them both. Their clever plan, a combination of Silas's knowledge of the land and Evelyn's resourcefulness, had worked. Justice was finally served. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Lawyers arrived, confirming Evelyn's identity and securing her inheritance. The news of her survival spread like wildfire, captivating the nation. Reporters clamored for interviews, and the Remington estate was swarming with activity. Despite the chaos, Evelyn remained grounded. She never forgot the kindness and compassion that Silas had shown her when she was at her lowest point. She knew that his simple act of humanity had saved her life, both physically and emotionally. One evening, after the lawyers and reporters had finally left, Evelyn sat down with Silas on the porch, the setting sun casting long shadows across the farm. She turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Silas," she said, her voice soft, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life. You gave me shelter, food, and most importantly, you gave me hope when I had none." She paused, taking his hand in hers. "I know that I'm now a very wealthy woman, but all the money in the world can't repay you for what you've done. Your kindness, your compassion, your willingness to help a stranger in need, that's worth more than any fortune." Silas smiled, his eyes twinkling. "You don't owe me anything, Evelyn. I just did what anyone would have done." "No, Silas," Evelyn insisted, "not everyone would have done what you did. You're a special person, and I'm so grateful to have met you." She knew his kindness was more valuable than any sum. Evelyn was determined to help Silas, but she knew he was a proud man. She couldn't simply give him money, it had to be a partnership, a way for him to use his skills and rebuild his life with dignity. She approached him with a proposal. She would invest in his farm, not as a handout, but as a business venture. She would help him modernize his equipment, improve his irrigation system, and expand his vegetable garden. She would also help him connect with local markets, allowing him to sell his produce at a fair price. Silas was hesitant at first, but Evelyn's genuine enthusiasm and respect for his knowledge eventually won him over. He agreed to the partnership, and together, they began to transform the farm. Evelyn used her business acumen to secure loans and grants, while Silas used his farming expertise to implement the new technologies. They worked side by side, learning from each other, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. The farm began to thrive. The vegetable garden expanded, producing a bountiful harvest. The chickens laid more eggs, and Bess, with improved feed, gave more milk. Silas was finally able to pay off his debts and start saving for the future. He wasn't just a struggling widower anymore, he was a successful farmer, a valued member of the community, and a partner to a woman he deeply admired. Evelyn had given him a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it. He was grateful for her help. The farm, once a symbol of Silas's loneliness and struggle, now became a beacon of hope and new beginnings. Silas and Evelyn, an unlikely pair bound by fate, had created a life together, a life built on mutual respect, gratitude, and a shared experience of loss and survival. Evelyn never forgot her family, but she found a new family in Silas and the Oakhaven community. She used her wealth to support local charities, honoring her parents' legacy of philanthropy. She also established a foundation to help other survivors of violence, providing them with the resources and support they needed to rebuild their lives. Silas, in turn, found a new purpose in life. He was no longer just a struggling farmer, he was a mentor, a friend, and a protector. He taught Evelyn about the land, about the importance of hard work, and about the simple joys of life. They spent their days working side by side on the farm, their evenings sharing stories and laughter. They found comfort in each other's presence, their bond deepening with each passing year. They were an unlikely couple, from vastly different backgrounds, but they had found love and happiness in the most unexpected of circumstances. Their love was lasting. Their story became a legend in Oakhaven, a testament to the power of kindness, compassion, and the enduring human spirit. It was a story of loss and survival, of hope and resilience, and of a struggling widower who saved a lone survivor, unaware that she was a millionaire, but knowing that she was someone worth saving.